what evidence do you have?
Let me also add, Mr. Chairman, that we used an income approach since we had access to the taxpayers' income and P&L statements. So we estimated out what the valuation should have been. So based on that use, we have a clear opportunity here to set the commercial valuation at a level that is at least on par to what it should be.
I don't see that income information here in the data that's been presented to the BOE.
Well, that's probably some evidence that we forgot to drop into the portal.
Okay, so if you don't present it, then we can't consider it.
Okay, well, we still use the income approach.
Thank you. So back to the taxpayer, would you like to rebut what the assessor had to say or present your own
I
evidence?
would actually. The income approach is misapplied and unsupported. The Missouri State Tax Commission has repeatedly ruled that a residential agricultural property does not need to become commercial unless the land itself dedicated primarily and continuously to commercial use. The burden of proof here lies with the assessor. Per 12 CSR 30-3.015 and Common Board of Equalization Procedures, when challenging classification, the assessor bears the burden of proof to show the intent of commercial use, extent and scope of operations, economic activity tied to the land, structural alterations on land improvements for business purpose. A website is not sufficient supporting evidence.
Thank you. Do you have a request to the BOE as a result of their statement just now?
Well, if the assessor is going to use an income approach, they must request additional income and operating expenses from the owner, use market support cap rates, disclosure of all assumptions. The PRC contains no rent roll, vacancy rate, no capitalization worksheet, just a line item stating income approach used. This is legally a professionally insufficient. The building generates no income. The income approach requires income. This structure generates no rent, has no tenants, and is not leased. It is functionally a personal workshop, which by IAAO standards should be valued using the cost approach as an outbuilding at depreciated replacement costs. No basis for cap rate or net income. The PRC shows no cap rate used, no NOI calculation, and no justification for the final commercial value of $38,120. That figure is purely speculative and does not meet uniform valuation standards. I do have proposed values. My proposal is residential market value of $122,922 at a 19% assessment rate and an assessed value of $20,321. Agricultural market value of $7,000 at a 12% assessment rate with an assessed value of $840. Commercial, $18,000 market value at a 32% assessment rate with an assessed value of $5,760. Give you a total of $147,992, an assessed value of $26,921.
Mr. Chairman, the assessment department would dispute that number as being entirely too low.
I can only consider the evidence that the assessment department has presented, and the constituent here, the taxpayer, has made a pretty good case that you haven't presented income data and that you haven't shown documentation as to why things were reclassified. Your case is not very compelling, Mr. Assessor. Based on, by the way, for the taxpayer, we appreciate you uploading this table that reflected the figures that you thought were appropriate and all the research that you've done. So at this time, I will propose that we place a market value of residential at $122,992, agriculture of $7,000, and commercial value of $18,000, as suggested and documented by the taxpayer, for a total market value of $147,992. Is there a second for that proposal? I second. Very well. We'll vote. Everybody say aye. Aye, aye, aye. There you go. That's our decision. Thank you to the assessment department. Thank you for the taxpayer. With that, we will move on to our next case.
Very good. That's how it's done.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you,
I
Sean.
improvised a little. I threw you guys off, but we caught up.
We did. That's the way, that's exactly the way that hearing would have gone down. Really close to that. What I don't hear when I listen in on the appeals, the big mistake that people make is they do not challenge the assessment department enough. Here, Larry, here I introduced the photo right from the start. And Larry says, wait a minute, that's not an evidence of an inspection, that's only a photo. That could be brought up every single hearing because they introduce that photo every single hearing. But do you know why the assessment department does not show an actual inspection log? Why they do not show the actual GPS log of that of an inspector going to that house?
Ooh, I know.
Why, Sean?
Because they didn't do it.
They didn't do it, they don't have it. They didn't introduce it in court, and you can call him on the rug every time, every time. I talked to a state tax commission attorney months ago. You know what the criteria was for winning the state tax commission? If the assessor cannot present any inspection evidence, the taxpayer wins every time. It's that easy. They don't have the evidence. They've not presented it. They can't get it. Guess what? All you have to do is bring it up and you win. That's the critical point. Well, another critical thing that Larry did here during the presentation, when we talked about the income method, the assessment department has no way of knowing how those calculations are done. It's just a number generated by their algorithm. They just pop in that income method in there. If you file a Sunshine Act request and ask them to provide the evidence, show your work, how'd you get to that number? They can't do it. Sean, you have something else to add there?
No, just that, the use of a CAMA system like this seems to be geared toward inflating a lot of prices, with the hope being that some fraction of taxpayers won't appeal. And when you don't appeal, you've basically said, well, the assessment department is right and they've done everything lawfully. I know this year's appeal deadline is over. I hope a lot of people appealed near the deadline because the appeal numbers were pretty small as of last Thursday, I think it was. But hopefully, I saw a lot of increased activity around the deadline. And for anybody that might be watching this video or somebody that's there live in person, if you tried to appeal at the last minute or any time and ran into any difficulty, either calling the BOE staff or with the online system, make sure you let us know and we will kind of coach you on the exception process so that the BOE can say, okay, you missed the deadline, but you have a good reason, and we'll still allow you to appeal for the year. So those possibilities are there, and they admitted in an open forum that they were willing to do that if the circumstances warranted.
Another thing about the scenario that we acted out is that here's Larry's very quick to point out they did not show any kind of information uploaded on the income approach. They had no data, they had no evidence to put in there. They tried to get by the BOE and snow it by, and occasionally pull it off because the taxpayer doesn't challenge them. You've got to be listening to these people because they're pretty slick. They're attorneys, and they'll some of them are, and they'll try to slip it right by you. But to be successful in these appeals, you have to listen to them, and when they try to get something past you, you call them out and you say that's not right. Like here, as the assessor, I lied several times about the agricultural state law. I said, oh, we're based on market values. And it sounds good to somebody at the BOE that really doesn't understand the way agricultural property is calculated. It's based on soil classifications of productivity. And I didn't know this even until a few weeks ago. So I was on the BOE for 14 years. I never had to deal with a reclassification in agriculture like this. We had a lot of people that wanted to get agricultural classification, but not to them they had taken away. But that's what we had this time. So when they talk market values and try to compare apples to apples in agricultural land, that's stepping over the line. That's against the state law. Larry pointed it out. He stopped them. That's how you fix this. You call them out. Now that doesn't mean you have to be able to quote the state law and have it down cold, because you're not an attorney either. But you just need to know the principle and point. So when they try to run around it, you say, wait a minute, that's not the way it's done. On these parcels that are split. This is something that they've done obviously to get around the state tax commission order and also to increase valuations. And under the state regulations, you've got to have clear notice to the owner of the property that they're going to split it, and they have to have documentation that they've done it. And if you notice on the website, every single property that's been split, you cannot search the history of that parcel, and that's against the state law. So when they've done that, they once again violate 3 or 4 state laws, and they've gotten away with it until the taxpayers start calling them out on it. That's what you have to do. Anything on that, Sean?
And that's what we're here for, is to educate folks on the process. We went through a lot of law that might only be applicable to a handful of people with Larry's particular case, but we demonstrated in a case that's really complex. We got through that despite our technical difficulties and joking around a little bit in about 20 minutes. The BOE tries to allocate about 10 minutes per hearing. And to be honest, that's sometimes not enough, and sometimes it's too much. If I had a different kind of taxpayer on the line as the BOE member, what I have heard in the past is sometimes people can just tell them things. My place needs a new roof. Well, we didn't see that evidence here. Evidence would have been better, but oftentimes the BOE will side with the taxpayer. But I encourage you to, do your best to have evidence on your side. So just that really is the purpose here, though, is to help people understand the kind of the flow that the BOE will hear from the assessor, hear from the taxpayer, and the taxpayer doesn't just get to present what they want to present, they can also refute the information that the assessor has presented. And that's, I think, often more powerful. The last thing, you mentioned it, Preston, 14 years on the BOE, you didn't know some of this stuff. I think we really need to press the state tax commission and our state lawmakers to educate with a mandatory education process BOE officials before they start to hear cases. This group is new. They seem to be trying to be fair, more so than the last group, and yet they don't have the education behind them that I'd like to see them have.
One other point I made during the presentation, I kept saying that Larry had new siding on his house, and I was trying to say that was an improvement and threw him out of the STC order. That actually has been alleged right now, as they've done that. What you do to get around that is say, no, that was not an improvement. That was a repair that I had to make. That was essential home maintenance. And that way it gets around the wording of being an improvement.
Exactly.
Because you've got to do that. But that's a trick you're doing this right now too. I mean, they're doing all they can to get around this STC order. And by saying that you've actually, you broke the rules, you're part of the property improvement. And that's why we did this to you. No, that you can't let them get away with that. You gotta call it a repair. And that's probably what it was. Right now, people are not putting out new swimming pools now. Doing all they can just to maintain their head above water.
Is it safe to assume we might have some questions from the audience, and do we want to go to that at some point, Preston?
Sure, Sean, let's go to questions. Anybody here have some? Sure, Diana.
First of all, oh, sure. So first of all, thank you very much for having this workshop. Larry, you presented an argument against commercial valuation of your workshop. And yet towards the end, you agreed to some commercial value. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, and this actually, not using the script, but my actual experience when I went and did my appeal in person, I recognized the fact that I did have some commercial property, but not to the extent of which the county saw it. The county sees my building down there, and without a physical inspection, the county labels my building as commercial. I also want to point out that they labeled my home as commercial. So they had no idea.
What you doing in that house, Larry?
What's that?
What you doing in that house?
Well, we sell a lot of that. See, we've had garage sales in the past few years. So Cammy's going to start selling salsa. So I'm sure they're going to get us there. But anyway, when I talked to the assessor on the phone, and said, well, for one, he wanted to know why I appealed. And I told him, well, the classification, you've got this all commercial. They didn't have us residential, nothing, just all commercial. And they looked at the two barn dominiums or metal buildings with metal siding, metal roof, and they assumed that they were both commercial structures. And when he said, well, we had no idea that you lived in one, and my response was, well, of course you didn't. How would you possibly assess that from a laptop in Fort Worth, Texas, or with the drone? Nobody's been on my property. You could clearly see that one is our home and one is my building. And for them to assume that my building is 100% commercial without inspecting the inside of the building is also incorrect. Because with the supporting evidence I brought, which were photographs of the inside of the building, you could clearly see that the downstairs of my building was an extension of my home. I had cars in it. I had my tractor in it. I had my track loader. I had my side-by-side. So I do build furniture and I have sold furniture, but not to the extent of what they wanted. And I wasn't going to let them overclassify.
And so even though you made an argument against having commercial enterprise, you did agree that some portion of your building should be classified.
I did, because I indeed do use it for that purpose, but not 5,840 square feet. Plus, they were classifying my entire home as commercial. And I do want to point out really quick that when I got there and met with the assessor, everything was great until it wasn't. And I think they thought that I was just going to lay down on the table and they were going to steamroll right over me. And every time I gave him an objection that he could not overcome, he had to leave the room, like at a used car dealership where the salesperson needs to go touch the desk and get direction. And after this happened for 2.5 hours, he was no longer my friend. And he was getting angry with me. And then he challenged me. And then he told me if I didn't take his quote unquote final offer, that we were going to go to the BOE. And when we went to the BOE, that he was going to petition the BOE for a $465,000 assessment on my home and $201,000 commercial on my property. And in his opinion, because I had logs stored on my land, that would also be considered commercial. They're going to try and strong arm you anyway and intimidate you any way they can.
Now, this was in your BOE appeal, or is this with the hearing officer prior?
This was when I was there in person and settled my appeal with them in person.
Assessment department.
At the assessment department. It never went to the BOE.
He met with the assessment department first.
You met with the assessment
I did.
department first, but I thought we were looking at a BOE.
This is what a typical BOE hearing would.
Yeah.
Would look like. Would you
Yes.
go through one?
I did not go through one. I did not need to.
Okay, because you spent 3 hours in the back.
I got,
The assessment department.
I had, yeah, the assessor had to lick his wounds when it was over with.
Clear one.
I wasn't gonna let them walk all over me.
Okay, I have a million questions.
Keep going.
Okay, so. Was this a negotiation?
Absolutely.
And what were the parameters of the negotiation? Like, were they? Like the threatening part,
Well, he was only threatened when he was backed into a corner and realized that I wasn't gonna lay down. So we were laughing and joking, and I even asked him how long he's worked for the assessment department, and I guess his career as a waiter didn't work, and he got a job there 4 years ago when COVID shut everything down. So he has just as much experience as being an assessor as you and I do. I know it's baffling, but
Let me also add that when they offer to come out and inspect your property, and a lot of times, especially with commercial businesses, they will almost demand they come out. You do not have to let them on the property. You don't have to let them in the building. And I tell people all the time, anything you say can and will be used against you. Those notes, if they're very mean, will end up in their files, and they will magically appear when you get to the BOE, and they'll pull those notes out. So I'm telling you, it's not to your advantage to meet with them. It's not to your advantage to let them on your property. You do not have to let them. So I would strongly tell you, and in fact, I've said this to me in groups, that in 14 years, the best commercial appeal I ever saw made was a storage owner who refused the county probably 5 or 6 times and said, you will not set foot on my place. You will not. And so the county showed up at the BOE hearing and they had no evidence. They had nothing. They had no income. They had no idea how much square feet these buildings were. They had no clue. Even with all the aerial photography, they had no idea. And guess what? He won a slam dunk in minutes.
So, you had mentioned a couple times that, a photo is not evidence of an inspection. Is a real estate listing with photos and evidence of inspection?
Yeah, they will use that. They'll use that at real estate listings too. In fact, they employ people full time to do nothing but look at real estate listings. In fact, the second you put a house on the market, they find that within days. I've seen them post it within 2 or 3 days. They've been listed. So they use that against you. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, you listed this for sale 3 months ago or 2 weeks ago for X amount of dollars. That's what you think it's worth. Why now you're saying it's worth $100,000 less? And I've seen them use that many times.
And what is the counter? What is
The counter answer says it's one thing on trying to sell something, it's another thing what you're putting on value for the tax rolls. It's 2 different animals, apples and oranges.
Yeah. Or my wife said she wants to move to Florida, right? My wife says, hey, let's move to Florida. And I say, okay, if we can get $800,000 for the house, we have money to move to Florida. I can list any house at any price I want. That doesn't mean that it's worth it in the market. So I would use an example that's just ludicrous, right? Because the fact is that an MLS listing might show them some interior pictures of your home if you allow the real estate agent to do that. And the other thing is that's only a listing that's taken place during the period of time that the assessment's taking place. So if it was a listing from 3 years ago, that you listed your house, that is to me essentially meaningless. It's not within the assessment period. We're gonna be working on some rules on evidence statutorily at the county level and then also with state lawmakers, because the commercial folks especially have very limited protections right now. The BOE wants some things from the legislature, and the legislature shortly after I draft it will want some things from the BOE, and hopefully we can come to some sort of an agreement that will make it so that the assessor has the burden of proof on commercial properties, and make it so that reclassifications have to go through a process and can't sneak up on a taxpayer. Merging parcels or dividing parcels, same thing, has to go through a process, can't sneak up on a taxpayer, can't be done in the year of an assessment, right? Unless it's at the request of the taxpayer, is my thought process.
Let me also add that last week I talked to the BOE staff person who's in charge of the department. And I was telling him about how there might be quite a few more commercial people have appeals based on discrimination. And he says, oh, they don't do this discrimination appeals. They're going to have a lot of statistical analysis. I said, so where's the rule on that? Where it says you have to do that? He says, well, at the State Tax Commission, that's one of the rules. I said, well, we're talking about the BOE. Where's your rule that tells you what qualifies as a clear formulas and mathematical statistical analysis that you must have for the BOE to make a discrimination appeal? He said, well, you just know what you have to do. I said, no, it's not clear. And here just even last week, the BOE cannot figure out what justified a sales comp. They cannot figure out the time range that was supposed to be used. The actual years of the assessment period, it ends 1st of January of 2025. And 2 years before that, so the sales comps should be used. But one of the managers for the assessment department, he says, we'll use whatever comps we want to for any time frame. So the BOE chairman's tried to pin him down, saying, well, are we talking about, could you use one a few months ago? He says, we'll use the best comp that we can get. He's like, well, can you give us a time frame when you'll use them? And they wouldn't do it. So here it is. They're trying to tell me that a certain kind of statistical analysis has to be used to justify a discrimination appeal, but they can't even set the right dates for when sales comps should be. So no, I say go forward with your discrimination appeal and prove that your property is overassessed based on what your neighbor's properties are, and go forward with it. Find out.
And I'll just add, I don't think the last group of BOE members, there was at least one who was starting to ask some critical questions like that. But this group seems much more inclined to do so. So I won't say nobody in the last group, but this group, it really seems like they are trying to be diligent and understand their jobs better. Frankly, I think I heard even some disappointment that things weren't better documented. And they theoretically run the staff that is the BOE. They should be able to direct their activities. They should be autonomously and independently working, subject to the rules that the legislature lays out and subject to the rules that are in state statute. And this group, I think, understands that better than some of the members of the last group.
Okay, any other questions?
What, it says, when you go in, when you send your appeal in, you have to have your documentation with the appeal?
All right, the question is, we have to have a documentation when you file the appeal. They had that rule at one time that you had to do it, or you had to do it in 10 days to file the appeal. But all the standing policy has been for years, or at least 5 years, that you get your documentation in 3 days before your hearing is scheduled. That's in the policy manual. You can download it online, but it's the policy and procedures of the Board of Equalization. So 3 days before your hearing, I'd say get your online information and dump it, but there's no reason to do it before then.
Yeah, and I'll just add something. When you get the opportunity to meet with the assessment department, which is what Larry did, I encourage you to take hard copies and not let them have them, right? And hold back some of your best evidence if you think that you're going to end up going to the BOE. So you want to try to convince them because that's the fastest way to get this resolved. But don't give away the farm. Don't give them everything you've got. And same thing with the BOF, because there's three kind of two informal sessions and then the actual official BOE meeting. Those two less formal sessions, one's with the assessment department, and the second one is with what we call a BOE officer, who's kind of there mediating between you and the assessment department. Those two, I would approach as an opportunity to learn what assessment thinks and to try to negotiate with them, but don't give away all the cookies that you might have in the cookie jar to try to prove your point. And then a few days before your actual appeal, I would say 4, just in case there's a technical glitch. Give yourself a 24-hour cushion. Make sure you upload your documents, but also make sure you look at what the assessment department has uploaded so that you're ready to refute that information. Oftentimes the comps they pull seem to be cherry picked for the most expensive. And there's other comps that you might have access to that are closer to your home in terms of geography, closer to your home in terms of specifications, and are less expensive. If you say to the BOE, the assessment department used these 3 comps and none of them are really like my property, and there's clearly comps that are, and I'm showing them to you, that would seem to hurt the assessment department's credibility and then credibility to you and make it more likely you would win with the BOE.
Sean, do we have any questions online? Anybody that says chat in to ask a question?
Fawn said that she had an experience in 23 when nobody ever came to her home. She knows because she works from home. I haven't seen any other questions in the chat. I will offer that people can unmute themselves if they want to ask questions, or they can type them into the chat, whichever they prefer.
Okay, we got another question here ready to go. Tony?
Yes, couple things. The first thing is whenever we purchase a property for X and they want to increase that by 5 and 6 times, that is uncalled for. There's no reason, nothing to sustain that. It's been on the market for over 5 years. I bought it for a price. They did not want to honor that price. After the BOE,
Coming home right on time.
honor that price. 2 years later, had to go back and fight for it again. The
Right
same,
away in the garage though.
2 years later, having to do it
Like we
again.
left that scooter on the.
David, please mute your
Or-
microphone.
For it. That's unacceptable. There's no reason to make a citizen have to go through that year after year after year. The other thing is the trick they tried here recently where they wanted to make Airbnbs and rental properties commercial. That's not a commercial property. So we know that's not gonna hold up. It doesn't look like, and that's good. Hopefully it'll work out like that. The
Yeah,
third
we
thing
fixed
is,
that
I
here
do
at the
have a
local
very
level
unique-
temporarily. We fixed the conversion of short-term rentals, Airbnbs, et cetera, here locally for this assessment cycle. And the hope is that the state will change that rule going forward. And ours was buying a little bit of time for those folks to get ready for whatever the change might be at the state level.
And I've got another one that is fairly unique, and to be honest, I hadn't thought of it till sitting here tonight. I've got a 7,500 square foot building, 3,750 on the main floor, 3,750 on the top. The downstairs is commercial, the upstairs are rental apartments. what do those rental apartments qualify as, residential or commercial?
That would be residential.
Because to this day, it's been commercial every year. So I just thought of it sitting here and I'm gonna have to have that reclassified. And that's a building that I bought for $37,000 for all 3,700 square foot of it. And they have that today, just over $300,000 assessed value.
Yeah, and so since we're outside of the appeal window, and we only see your first name, we don't know your real name. I will just say, hopefully you have an open appeal on that property. Hopefully you clicked the classification as part of your appeal, and if you didn't, then reach out to me or Preston, and we'll give you some rationale for how to file a late appeal and see if it's compelling to the BOE to accept.
On that particular one, I did just get filed yesterday. I did not think of the classification though, so I'm gonna go in and change that to where I can adjust that to classification also.
Okay, you might not be able to change that since the appeal window's changed, but there again, we can try to help you with the right verbiage to ask for that to be added.
What did he say?
He said you might not be able to get that changed since
Okay.
the appeal window, but he's gonna help you.
Yeah, I'll get with you on that. I've talked to you before, but we'll get together and talk about that. I'll talk to Preston about it.
Sounds good.
But it's the deal about where we have to do this 2 years ago, and now we're going back fighting for the same thing. That's a whole nother issue that we gotta stop. We can't continue with that.
Agreed. This is about both the leadership at the county having their priorities misaligned, and it's about some things that the state lawmakers have to do to make this whole process less subject to the abuses that we've seen here and that 10 years ago St. Louis County used to see. So it can be cleaned up at the local level. And my goal is to get state lawmakers to clean it up in a real transformational way that would really simplify things.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. Anybody
Fawn
else?
has her hand up. Fawn, come off of mute.
This,
Hi, everyone. I want to, first of all, thank you for this session tonight. My question is, and Preston was on the call when I was on there, and they skipped all and jumped all over to Dodge, Las Vegas, and everywhere else. When I was on the bill, I took the whole day off from work. I was docket number 18. So there was 3 other people in front of me. So they went to break at 12, came back at 1, and they took a vote. Do you want to go back to get to 10:30 or do you want to go forward to the 1? They all voted to go to the 1. It was only 4 of us that they could have went and grabbed. Then they finished those an hour, about an hour at 2 o'clock. They were done. They decided to go ahead on and go to the 3 o'clock ones and not even go back and get us. That really pissed me off because I've been waiting since 2023 to have my appeal done. I already have an STC file. So what they told me to do when I went last year for STC, they told me go ahead and go to BOE. When I get my decision from them, if I'm not satisfied with it, then go ahead on and call them back, and because they're keeping it open, right?
Yeah.
So my issue now is that I have over $20,000 in repairs with my estimates, pictures, and everything for the previous assessment year, right? So now that and I went back and I did the numbers and everything. So they did do the 15%, but it's based off of the previous assessment where they did not even consider my over $20,000 in repairs that need to be done. I mean, I need I've been having my AC just, Band-Aid together. That needs to be replaced. The water heater, the furnace, the carpet is gone to mash, it needs to be, and there's underlaying, so there's not no wood floors or anything underneath it. So the whole carpet has to be replaced and a bunch of other stuff. And I uploaded all of those estimates and everything. So my question is, so I don't want to drag this on. My question is, I went on and submitted an appeal yesterday for the new one we just got, because if they took into consideration the repairs I need to have done, then that's going to be well over 15%. Once they go back and look at my stuff and say, okay, even if I don't get it down to where my opinion is, it's still going to make it way over 15% if I didn't do anything for this 2025.
Yeah.
So I know that we got an email from the senior appeal officer in St. Louis. I mean, not St. Louis, STC. I'm thinking ST. Okay, but the tax commission. And he said that he's going to start scheduling the appeals and everything. So now I'm like, I don't know what to do now. You know, as for it. And I have the senior citizens tax freeze, right? So I don't know if that's going to kick me out of that or what. I just don't know.
Yeah, you won't get kicked out of the senior freeze once you're approved, contrary to the media reports that Frank decided to put out. Um, so, um, I guess two things. One, the BOE, when they make decisions like they made with your not to hear appeals where people have waited all morning and taken time off work, I think they need to understand that impact. So I would suggest drafting a letter to the members of the BOE and just tell them exactly what happened and what the adverse impact was on you. Because we can't expect them to make better decisions if they don't know the adverse impact of their decisions. So I would definitely do that. And if you'll transmit that letter to me, I'll be sure to get it to the members of the BOE and the staff, right? Um, so we need to treat these new members with a little bit of grace. They had limited training. They haven't done this before for the most part. Some of them don't even pay their own taxes. Um, but we need to help them get better since they do appear to be asking some of the hard questions of the assessment department. And then the second thing is to call the BOE and talk to probably Gladys or whoever answers the phone and say, this was my date, this was my
I
time.
did that. Not to cut you off. I did that.
Yeah.
I immediately got on the phone and called when I saw which direction they were going. And
Yeah.
I talked to and I even wrote her name down. It was Anita
Okay.
Bradley. And so she went and she said, hold on. So she went to the lady that was doing the docket, whoever that person is, somewhere in the sky. And she came back and said, well, no, she says that they're not going to hear your appeal today. You'll be contacted when you and I'm like, I just took off a whole day of work.
Yeah.
Who's gonna pay me for those wages that I lost?
Right.
So, I mean, it wasn't gonna take that long for them to go back and get us 4 people that they left out in the snow somewhere.
Right. And I obviously totally agree with you. Make sure you include that in what you draft to them. And I know you were trying to get heard that day, and that didn't work, but I would go back and make another call or email me to my county email, and I'll see if the director of the BOE who manages the staff can help do something to get you heard. What I prefer, and Preston, you can disagree with me if you think I'm not right, it's better before you're talking to the STC to have your BOE settled. Because if the STC makes a decision before the BOE has had a chance to, not that they didn't have a chance to, but before they have made a decision, then you're into a little bit of ambiguity as to whether or not the assessment department will update your value, even if the STC says to. So let's try to get you in before it goes too far with the STC. But if you can't, I would work with the STC and say, I've been scheduled multiple times. They run late. I've always made myself available and taken time off work, and they have deprived me of due process repeatedly at the BOE. So I really need to skip that step now and see if the STC will allow an exception.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Preston, that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. In fact, when I was telling people to take no change and go to STC, is basically when we had that old group of BOE people. And
Yeah.
it wasn't a fair hearing. Now they are getting a fair hearing. In fact, for the most part, when you show up at the BOE, they give you an ample opportunity to present your case. They listen to you and they give you the benefit of doubt. And that didn't happen 6 months ago.
Can you speak a little bit more about the scheduling of these appeal hearings, I guess, or prior meetings? I've heard a lot about, I had a scheduled time. I'm standing by the phone didn't ring. And so I kept on waiting, and then they call me at some unscheduled time. Or what happens if the fault, my phone doesn't work very well because I work in a poor reception area, so call dropped, call doesn't go through. Does that mean is there like a negative impact on the taxpayer if they're not available when the BOE calls at an unscheduled time?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so the BOE staff do keep track of their efforts to reach you for a hearing. I think there could be a point where they say, we've tried to call this person 5 times with a scheduled hearing and they haven't responded. And so we're just going to no change them. They can go to the STC if they want. I, I see this issue. And one thing this new group is doing is they're trying to make plans to allow in-person hearings in Independence at least 1 day a week during the appeal timeframe. That'll help to alleviate some of this. It's real easy to say, oh, we don't want to hear from somebody more on the phone today, like Fawn, even though she's been waiting because you never had to talk to Fawn. Well, if Fawn's sitting there staring at you for 2 hours waiting for her turn, and then you say, sorry, just go home. Like that's a harder decision for them to make. So the scheduling, I will tell you this, it's all based upon the convenience of the BOE. And when I say that, we talk about the three main members of the BOE, but there's actually 5 people that should be hearing your case, one from the city and one from the school district that you reside in. And so what they try to do is hear all the cases for the Lee Summit School District and the city of Lee Summit in a same time window so that those extra members can be there. I think that they could do that and also take input from the taxpayer about the specific times they're available. Those are some of the things that I want to modify in the county code of ordinances that set expectations for how these things happen. The gentleman who's now the head of the BOE staff that Preston met, and he took care of Preston's issue. He took care of another issue for me yesterday. He came from collections. He seems to have a real service first attitude. He came into a really difficult situation and he seems to be trying to make it better along with the BOE members. So the more we communicate about some of these challenges, the more they can modify their processes to be more accommodating to taxpayers, which I think is their duty.
I have a question,
Okay,
another question. So, again, we are commercial, obviously, we've got a commercial building, we have a commercial building. We also sell Christmas trees, but it's, if you figured it out by how many days a year that we, commercial, it's about 30 days out of the 360 days. Does that matter? I mean, we approximately have about 15 weddings and we sell Christmas trees about 12 days out of the year. The rest of the time we're growing Christmas trees and we're preparing our property for whatever we're doing.
well, I tell you what, I would handle it if I were the assessor. I would say that you are actually a commercial enterprise for 30 days of the year, but the rest of the time you're storage. So I'd raise a storage place and probably even residential storage. So that's probably how I'd classify it.
So is that?
Is there anything in statute, Preston, that would dictate that they have to proportionally do it based on the number of days of use?
You know, I don't think it is. In fact, if you look at statutes, what actually justifies commercial classification, the actual definition is anything that is not agricultural or residential is considered commercial. And that's how you define commercial.
Isn't there a primary use? Is there not a primary use piece of language in there?
Not that I'm saying, no. I mean,
Okay.
and I mean, they even have a classification in Jackson County called mixed use. So this is definitely a mixed use property, but it's commercial for 30 days of the year and the rest of the time it's not.
Gotcha.
I mean, but I think that's since we're gonna be talking to the state legislature about how to change it, I think this is an issue to bring up because you are going to have uses that are going to be very seasonal.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm encouraging people to show up when the state legislature comes to Kansas City on August 13th at Union Station. Whether you get a chance to testify or not, having a crowd there when they're hearing about problems with assessment, I think would be very impactful.
Okay, Kim?
Yes. So Bob and I have this wedding venue and a Christmas tree farm. That's my husband. And I was thinking about what Tony just said about one level of his property is commercial, but upstairs he has rentals. And how do we classify the wedding venue business? It's a rental. We don't have like the public that can come in. We don't sell things. So are we doing it the right way? That's still considered.
You know, I've looked a lot at commercial classifications the last couple of weeks, and the subclasses that Jackson County uses are just incredibly inconsistent. They're not well done. They have not done a good job of classifying properties on sub-use, because when you're trying to compare within subclasses, you want to make sure you're compared against your peers in the same organizations. It's really hard, and they've done really a bad job of classification. It's just that indicative of how bad their database is inside and out. So it's, like I said, even some of the time you can classify your options there as a warehouse. And when it's not being actually as for an activity, it might even take a classification of amusement recreation, since that's not actually a pure commercial activity like obviously not producing anything. This is an event.
So I had a Sean real quick and Preston on the Luke's Christmas tree farm. I don't understand how it wouldn't be agricultural, because it's the same principle where a farmer has a crop, but they only harvest so many days a year. That's exactly what the Lukes are doing with the tree farm.
Well, the tree farms without buy, it's agricultural. We're talking about the event space here.
Well, I know that we had talked about the tree farm earlier in the county that
12% of
Yeah.
the assessed value is agriculture, which I think that's too low.
Only 12% of your Christmas tree farm is agricultural.
That's what it says on my tax.
Yeah.
What's the rest of it?
that's the gray area.
32% commercial.
Well, how many acres of your Christmas tree farm?
How many?
20?
But we don't
20.
have trees.
Yeah, Preston,
Yeah.
I think we're confusing the percentage of market value that is applied to commercial, agriculture, residential versus the percentage of a property's value
I
that
think
is
so.
placed into those categories.
Okay, yeah, I see the difference.
How much of your agricultural are they to classify as agricultural? Because that, from your declarations you got, your assessment sheet, they will change that.
It should be all agriculture except this building.
Exactly.
Exactly. There is,
The only thing that's not agricultural on it.
Because at this point, you're no different than a farmer that's growing beans or corn.
Plus, we are under the forestry law, or whatever it is.
Sure.
It takes us more than 5 years to produce a tree to be cut. Most of the trees are cut after 8 years. So I know we fall into that standard with the forestry, commercial law, whatever it is. Where we harvest tree after 8 years.
For purposes of the recording, you might want to repeat the question and comments that were made because she didn't have a mic.
It's a little bit difficult without the mic, but he was talking about his trees take 5 years to develop and then
Takes eight.
eight years to develop, so then it is considered forestry operation, and that's definitely an agricultural classification. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
I promise this is my last question.
There's no quotas.
So, can anybody talk to, valuation of a very old agricultural building? Right, so after much examination to try to understand why my assessed value went from $58,000 to $540,000. I realized that they only made one change, and that was to my main horse farm facility. And they had allocated all that change to that one building, which happens to be a 40-year-old pole barn with arena and horse stables that are considerably aged. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I dispute their value of my large 40-year-old building as being not $540,000? Because clearly I couldn't build that today for $540,000.
Well, I've read this weekend on this, and it's clear in the state law when it talks about agricultural classification. You have the soil types for productivity, but it also makes it very clear that any associated buildings or structures that are associated with that agricultural purpose is considered agricultural. So they cannot evaluate that as a commercial structure or even a residential structure. It has to be evaluated as an agricultural structure. So that's whatever they do on the land, I think you have to carry over to the structure too.
So I did submit a number of sunshine requests asking for methodology, tables, schedules. You know, I had like 2 or 3 of them say, what's your basis for valuation of an agricultural building? Do you have a depreciation schedule? Do you have a, cost basis? Do you have a square footage basis? And the answer was not found. So I can't find a sales, like, do I have to try to factor how to build this building using 40-year-old materials? I mean, it's just ridiculous, right?
Well, maybe the easiest way to get, see what you have insured for, that might be a start. You say, I've got insured for this as a replacement, that might be the starting point, and you say you depreciate it down, take a depreciation from it. And that would be a reasonable value.
So they do accept depreciation, like.
Yeah, depreciation is, it's a commercial structure, so you have to do depreciation also. But I think that the assessor has made access to a lot of the insurance declarations. And she's able to get to that. And that's why I think also they're gonna be challenging some people based upon what you have insured for.
And Preston, horses are livestock. So I assume if she has a stable, that she would just say, that's livestock that I use the property to sustain. You don't
Yeah.
have to be, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have to be saying, if you have pet cows on a pasture, even if you're not trying to make money off your pet cows, isn't that still agriculture because it's using to raise livestock?
I really don't think that we need to play this game with the assessor to try to separate out the building. I think according to the way the state law reads, it says all associated structures and buildings are classified as agriculture. So I think for them to try to break it out and separate, we're playing their game. I don't think we should.
Fair enough.
So are
Fair
you
enough.
saying that valuation of an agricultural building is not performed in the same way as a valuation of a commercial building or a residential building?
Correct. Whatever your space is under that property, how much acreage you've got or square feet that you have, I value it on the very same square footage I had it in the class, similar class soil that you've got in the pastures.
Land.
The land.
Well, they have not changed the land valuation. I can see on my.
Then that's why it should be the very same as the building. The building and the land should be the same square footage.
But the building value itself, they said in 2023, it was $58,000, and now it's $540,000.
And that's the game we can't play. Don't even let them separate it out. For them to separate it out, it's breaking the state law.
I think I understand what you're saying is you're like, correct me if I'm wrong. Your question is, how did they go from $58,000 on the building value to 500,000? Is that the question?
Yes.
Don't play the game. Don't let them break it out.
Make it
Just
100%.
pretend the building's not even there. It's just a piece of land. They just happen to have a roof on top of it, but the land is the land. It's all one agricultural operation. So no, I think for them to break it out and try to put the building there separately, we're playing their game. We shouldn't do it.
Well, they're playing a game not just with me, with about 200 other people, because I went through your spreadsheet.
Yes.
And I've gone through about 20 different properties that are my neighbors, as well as other similar operations, horse sporting facilities with indoor arenas. And they've done the same thing to so far 5, 6, 7, 10 that I've looked at, right? Where they picked one building and they changed the value of one building, as far as I can see, from something like some nominal level to some big number.
I know a case in Butner. They went from a $50,000 building they built 10 years ago to almost $800,000. And so here it is. They had the actual construction price that they built it 10 years ago for 50 grand. And now all of a sudden overnight, it's like they struck oil inside the building. So no, it's ridiculous for them to do that. But here again, you've got what the building was either built for or what you have it insured for. And those are your hard numbers. You want to do the depreciation, you get it down to what it be. And I don't know why we need to keep trying to dispute them, trying to find similar buildings that have sold or similar buildings that have been built, or try to get somebody to recreate this just for their benefit. We shouldn't get into this debate with them because the state law is very clear. Agricultural enterprises include the land and the buildings all in one sentence. Period. Don't break it out. And I mean, they had that, like you said, to hundreds of people in eastern Jackson County here. I've heard from many of them. And wait until you read the state law, it's very clear. But we don't need to get in this argument, this fight with them to try to quibble over what the price of that building is. We have a state law on our side.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how to frame that.
Just like he said.
You say, this is what the value that I say this building is worth based on what I have it insured for and the depreciation, and that's the price, period. And you stop there. You don't go back and forth, well, we take 300,000 for it, we take 400,000 for it, this is not auctions. You say, this is my number and I'm done.
Well, I guess I have a question, all right, so, when you depreciate a building, so say we built this building and X amount of dollars. But on our taxes every year, they depreciated the building, of course. So we have to have documentation of depreciation since it was built, is that what we do, or? I don't understand the depreciation side of it.
I mean, your accountant will go through what depreciation value is, what you subtract off your taxes each year. You
Yeah.
depreciate that value, it goes down. You got wear and tear, you have other repairs you have to make, you delete that. And you have what your insurance costs to do, whether it's to replace it or just to, what the recover the costs.
Yeah, I'll throw something else out there.
Okay.
So with taxes, the depreciation methods are sometimes not the same as real world accounting and what actual values are. So there's the concept in federal tax code of accelerated depreciation, where sometimes you can take the full value or half the value of an asset immediately in the year that it's put in service. I would do a straight line based depreciation. So if you spent $400,000 to build a building 40 years ago, it's going to depreciate $10,000 a year. And if it's built, that long ago and it's been commercial all the time and you've been depreciating it, that would be a starting point, would be my suggestion. So not just your tax records, but specifically a straight line depreciation version, because I think they'd take objection to, an accelerated depreciation schedule where you say, I built it last year and it's now half the value of when I built it. The IRS lets you do that, but your assessor.
You're saying 10% a year, we could say?
If the building has a 40-year useful life, if it has a 30-year useful life, then bottom line is it's the useful life of the building divided by the price is how much you would deduct each year.
Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Your finance degree comes through.
See? I'm not just a pretty face.
But I mean, really the idea is let's quit playing football on their field. We don't need to keep playing by their rules. This is our property. This is your appeal. And like Larry does, he gets in their face and says, this is the game I'm in control. I'll determine whether or not you're going to consider this. You didn't provide this, or this. That's how you get in their face. If you let them drive the debate and them to call the field you're going to play on, you're going to lose. That's why you say, we're not playing the game you want to play. We're in charge of this, and this is our property, and this is the evidence we're presenting, and this is what you're going to consider today. And that's why when you come to the BOE, the biggest thing you're going to have to do is come up with a solid number of what you're convinced that your property is worth. You don't show up there without that. There's one and only thing you show up the BOE with. This is what I'm convinced my property is worth, based on my research on sales comps, based on my research on depreciation, on repairs. Here's what I base that number on. And you come forward, you're going to win 90% of the time.
Well, what if we don't want to tell them what we think it's worth? That's not.
You're making the appeal and you're challenging their number. You're going to have to come up with your own number, okay? You don't show up there and just leave it to your mercies. Throw yourself on that mercy, you're going to lose. You're going to have to do the work in your appeal to show forward what I believe it's worth. Sure, the burden of proof is on the assessor to come forward with the evidence and justify their number. The first question you're going to get at the BOE every time is, what do you think your property is worth? You don't think the assessor had it right? What do you think it's worth? There, question one. I've given it to you.
Well, okay, that doesn't make quite sense because, so you're saying, okay, so say we have 20 acres, $10,000 an acre. So we have 20 acres, $10,000 an acre is, I don't know.
That was a made up number. The reason I did that is just so you.
Jackson County number.
The Jackson County number, yeah, this should be based on soil classification.
Okay. So we've got that, and we've got our houses on the property. And then we also have the wedding building on our property, that we use, 15 times out of the year. So if we take what we think this building what we built the building with in 2019, we know what it cost us to build this building. So we have that value minus depreciation. We also know our acreage and we have a pretty good idea of the house value on the property. So we just add all those numbers and we say, okay, so this whole area is worth, well, it'd be almost 900,000.
So they set the value at 900,000, would you take it?
No. I think it's worth more than that. I mean, that's minus,
they say on the
that's
tax
minus
roll.
our trees. I mean, we have trees on our property that are worth $500,000.
I mean, if I'm the BOE chairman, I'm saying, okay, you came forward and said that your property is worth 900,000, the assessor says it's worth 2 million. Will you agree to 900,000 today and put it on the tax rolls?
I guess so.
God, no. So you wanna shoot yourself in the foot? That's what I can't do.
He's not allowed to go out of that.
So you got property and inventory.
Yeah,
You've got to keep that, the trees aren't worth anything until you sell them. You don't have $500,000 for trees.
Okay, Diana.
I have done a ton of research in 7 days about valuation of agricultural property, land. And I can walk you through how to look and see what they think you have and how you can compare it to what you actually have for land valuation by soil class. Now, you can look into your, I believe this is a property record. Okay, so if you look into the land summary, you can see how they classified your acreage, whether it's ag or whether it's residential or whether it's commercial by acres and survey, right? So you can dispute that. For your agricultural land, the soil classes, you can see what they have versus what the USDA has on their website. You can do an actual comparison to challenge the values. And the values, I can show you where the values come from, so there's valuation tables. So you can do that on that simple math yourself. So that's the land. The crop on your land is irrelevant. The value of the crop on your land is absolutely irrelevant. There's no like what your trees are worth versus what the fees or how much honey you get off your land versus how many hay bales. That is absolutely irrelevant what you're growing.
That's future gains, is what
It has absolutely nothing to do with land valuation. Zero.
Exactly.
So, and then, which would lead to the only other piece they got to work with, which they seem to be hammering on from what I'm looking at, is the building valuation, right? And so they've been jacking up the building valuations on everything I looked at. So whether it's a garage or whether it's a pole barn or whether it's a commercial building, they're adjusting the values that way, and so that's seems to be a completely separate argument. But I'd be happy to walk you through what I found and what I got, and the links and the references of how to click here, and enter this.
Yeah, we posted the other day the link to the USDA, you look up soil types for your farm, and it replacing Jackson County, and also the Department of Revenue for acre allocations for each soil classification in 2024. So we posted that the other day too. So all the math and how to pull this down there. So we learned a lot in the last few days. Sean, anything else? Anybody online? Sean,
No, I'm replying to some things in chat about county code and what constitutes physical inspection. And what I said in the chat, for those that aren't looking at it, is that the last group of BOE members seemed to accept at face value when the lawyers said, if we see a picture, then it proves they were out there and they must have done an inspection. This new group doesn't seem as inclined to have that much deference toward the county attorneys. So I think while that didn't work during the really peak of 23 and 24, this group, it may very well be a good thing to bring up and say, look, I don't even think they did an inspection, therefore they shouldn't have increased me by more than 15% from 22. And here's the county code and state statute, which I'm working on getting into the chat, that specifies that mere observation from the street does not constitute an inspection. Well, a photo taken from the street, if that's your only evidence, that means you have no evidence of an actual inspection, is how I would present it. It doesn't say it doesn't say that you know, a photo isn't sufficient evidence, but common sense would dictate that. And this new group seems to be trying to apply some common sense.
Yeah, the actual state law, it says a drive-by inspection does not justify an inspection, is state law 137.115, paragraph 12. And that was the law that we changed in 2020, because in 2019, the assessor wanted to use aerial photography only. And they claimed those were inspections, so literally had to change the state law, so she couldn't just use aerial photography. So this has been a process for 6 years, folks. Really, we've had to fight them every which way. Well, guys, we'll go ahead and we'll stop it here in an hour and a half, and I'll edit the video so we can get that out tomorrow. And I want to thank everybody on the line that was with us. Sean, thanks so much for carving your time out. I know you've had a long day. So thanks so much. I appreciate it. And Larry and I'll hang around here a little bit later.
You bet. And just a quick thank you to my legislative aide, Ashley, who's out working at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night so that we would have internet at this facility. Thank you to Elon Musk for building Starlink that made that possible. I figure if we mention him on the video, maybe somebody will detect it and it'll get a lot more views. And then just the idea that this Thursday we're doing a press conference, and it's a very diverse group. It's people from the urban community, it's people from Eastern Jackson County. We're doing a press conference and kind of rally at the courthouse steps to push for the recall election to be on August 26th or the soonest feasible date. Right now, there's some legal wrangling about that, and we want to show the people in the courthouse that we really think that the recall election should follow the county code, or county charter that says it's supposed to take place within 60 days. So Thursday at 2 p.m. at the Jackson County Courthouse at 12th and Oak in Kansas City.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it tonight, and thank you so much. All right, thanks,
There's
Sean.
one more question out here, Preston, that I haven't answered, so don't kill the Zoom just yet.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's just follow up. So we're good. And it'll be part of the recordings once we put it out. So
Very good. Well, I'll stop the recording and get that out tomorrow.
great idea here, Preston. I hope this was helpful for folks and gave them some ideas. And I hope the video gets viewed. Please share it once we put it up so that as many people as possible can see it.
You bet. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Smiths.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for all your hard work.